Let's take a look at some information and charts on Monero for Brave New Coin. So Monero is a proof of work coin which previously had the Crypto Night consensus algorithm until late 2019. They had some issues with ASICs on the chain, tried to adjust the algorithm a couple times, and finally decided enough is enough. We're going to change the algorithm entirely. So since that time, they've been living on RandomX, which is a CPU favorable consensus algorithm, meaning GPUs and ASICs aren't really a logical choice to mine Monero. And since January 2020, that hash rate has continued to increase. It's important to realize that a RandomX hash is not equivalent to a Crypto Night hash, so you can't really compare these one-to-one. But over the past year and a half, hash rate and difficulty have increased quite substantially in this new RandomX paradigm. Some of this is cloud mining. Some of this is probably cryptojacking, ransomware related. I'll get to that. It's hard to really know, but if it's favoring CPUs, it's almost better for malware, probably. Botnets, that sort of thing. This is an issue with Doge as well. I haven't really seen reports on that, but that's just an instinctual analysis based on what I'm seeing with the transaction counts. In general, you don't usually see really harsh movements in hash rate or transactions unless there's some sort of bot activity involved, or cloud mining in this case, as there was a couple times. You know, it's typically like flat or slightly rising. Now, price has a lot to do with this as well. As price increases, it supports more hash rate because the incentives are increasing on a notional basis. And Monero's inflation just kind of sits at sub 2%, where it's going to live kind of in perpetuity. So Monero doesn't have a total cap on coins, but it does have a perpetual security subsidy to keep it going in the future. So unlike ETH, unlike BTC, Monero's hash rate basically at an all-time high. If we look at all those annual inflation rates, Monero sitting at 1.4% right now, BTC dipping below 1.25 because of the hash rate shenanigans in China, block times increasing. That's going to decrease inflation in the near term. But Monero positioned extremely well relative to every other altcoin that uses proof of work. LTC, Doge, ETH, Dash, DGB, VTC, Zcash especially, and Grin especially, probably the two biggest competitor privacy coins to Monero, even though Monero's the one true god when it comes to on-chain privacy, with Grin at a close second. But Grin's inflation means that it's not a buy and hold ever, at least in the near term. If you're buying Grin now, you're getting inflated to death with the assumption that it's going to go up in the future, unless you're just using it as a method of exchange, which is perfectly adequate. But Monero's inflation is about as low as anything else you can find other than BTC. If you look at transaction counts, and this is the big clue to me that this is not normal activity on chain. When you see spikes and drops and dips and pops like this, 4x, 6x in a day or two, and then all that gets dropped. This is very much, to me, botnet related. Not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that that is going to hurt Monero in the long run. I'm just saying it is what it is. This is not normal or natural or organic activity. It's great that it's increasing, but that may mean that botnet activity is increasing. Again, I haven't seen anything specifically on this. This is just speculation, but you can see the difference between Crypto Night and then RandomX kicking in. And maybe this is just a function of the mining stuff. Again, I don't know. I'm sure the Monero people will let me know in the comments. But certainly not just people activity here. A lot of other stuff going on. Fees, though, on the other hand, are down substantially. That's after they adjusted how the privacy works for the bulletproof stuff. And fees are basically flatlining. Certainly up since mid-2020, but not exploding like they did previously. And in the near term, transactions are down from 27,000 to 18,000. So that's certainly not bullish for anything to see transaction counts decline like that. But you can see the explosion here in transactions. Even since RandomX came online, transactions have exploded. And because of Monero's privacy, I can't really look at anything else on chain that I would normally look at, like active addresses or average transaction amounts. All that is obfuscated or hidden within the details. The total fees in comparison to Cred, Dash, Zcash, Verge, Grin. Grin's daily fees at $2. That's just funny. These aren't like mega substantial relative to BTC or ETH, but it does say that people are using the chain relative to everything else. It's not exactly a one-to-one comparison saying there's more activity on Monero because fees are higher. Every chain is different, scalability is different, what the chains are used for is different, but it's good to see rising fees in general for any altcoin with proof of work. It says people care about it, people are using it. Zcash gets a lot of flack for how they collect funds for devs and development, and it's interesting to look at other coins like Litecoin, Bitcoin, even Monero here. They put out a report basically saying how they use the money over the past couple of years, transparency report. And a lot of these coins get donations for development, even Grin, rather than collecting a treasury. The difficulty with collecting a treasury, even though I think it's the right thing to do to support development, is how do you pay out the treasury and determine who gets what? There's just layers of centralization there that have to occur. So it's definitely a sensitive dance, but it's important that developers get paid to work on the coins, obviously, as well as general infrastructure for websites and node development, wallet development, all that stuff. Someone needs to take care of that, get paid for that. Even though it is an open source project, you're much better off paying people to do certain activities and jobs. Monero also released I wouldn't call it a paper, but a discussion on atomic swaps. I'm not going to explain that in this video, but definitely give that a read if that interests you. Ultimately, the issue I have with using Monero in ways that aren't just on-chain are we run into breaking the privacy capabilities in some way. We're just adding layers of potential issues with breaking that privacy. Anytime you send anything to an exchange, for example, you're breaking the privacy if it's a KYC'd exchange. If they know your name and address and all that stuff, you're breaking Monero's privacy because you're saying, this is me, here are my coins, right? At least for those specific coins. So one of the issues with using Monero for criminal activities, where do you go to sell it, right? Where do you go to offload your stuff? It's hard to sell on any exchange that doesn't necessarily have KYC. It's hard to OTC, probably. If you look at the Colonial Pipeline people, they used Binance, I think. If you look at some of the other ransomwares stuff, they used Binance, Huobi. It's not, it's funny to use crypto in that way and then to just turn yourself in, basically, because it's all on chain saying this is who I am if you're KYC'd. And we're seeing those doors closing, thankfully, for criminal activity. But then we run into the discussion of just financial privacy in general. There was a paper, I don't know when this got put out, but it's another good read talking about Monero's current format is mostly immune to known passive attacks, resistant to tracing, tracking, that sort of thing. So it's definitely one of the stronger privacy enhancing, they say it right in the first line, privacy enhancing that exceeds Zcash and Dash Decred. It's going to do better than everything else. They talk about chain analysis here. Chain analysis, I never know how to say that company. So Monero does what it does better than anything else. If you look at Google Trends for Monero, they never quite rose to the previous prominence of 2017, but they did climb to multi-month highs, have started to decline again, so certainly not bullish for price. Something else interesting, talking about ransomware, just because I'm seeing non-stop headlines about the same talking points I've seen for years. The Google Trends for ransomware, May 2017, this was WannaCry ransomware. This was this most recent spike was the Colonial Pipeline ransomware. Interestingly, in both cases, they used Bitcoin over Monero. And if you were around in 2017, you'll remember WannaCry affecting tons of computers. I think the NHS and the UK got affected in a big way. Just not good globally. But that was a Bitcoin thing. If we look at the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack that just happened, that was a ransom in Bitcoin. And if the criminals are stupid, they're using Bitcoin because, again, it's completely open ledger, traceable online to anybody with a few clicks of a button. There were some Russian spies using Bitcoin as well. This was a few years ago now. And I'm seeing, this was also funny, the CEO of the Colonial Pipeline said paying the ransomware was the hardest thing he's ever done or something to that effect. But the password that was used didn't even have 2FA on it. So I'm not really going to victim blame here, but they were kind of asking for it with stuff like that. Just very poor security. So we have all this stuff going on. We have ransomware, we have chain analysis, saying that they raised a ton of money with a $4 billion valuation. They still can't track Monero, by the way. And this same headline that I'm seeing year after year, Monero emerges as a choice for criminals. This was just recently, over the past couple days, tons of outlets are running that. This was 2018. Why crooks are switching from Bitcoin. And you'll see this over and over again. This was an article from 2020 about Bitcoin and ransomware. This was just recently in 2021, Bitcoin and ransomware. Jim Cramer just said he sold his Bitcoin because of ransomware attacks, even though in 2017 he was saying maybe you should be buying Bitcoin because of the ransomware attacks. It's just funny how this stuff is inextricably linked to automatically to criminal activity. Monero has trouble getting listed anywhere because the privacy is so solid, at least in my opinion. For regulatory purposes, a lot of exchanges just can't list it because they can't verify where it comes from. Especially in the US, we're going to see increasing clampdowns on transactions greater than $10,000, I think it was. In the UK, I'm hearing rumors of KYC AML for DeFi requiring increasing surveillance there. So the walls are closing in, certainly. Flipping to technicals, this is the 1 year MA. In the green here, this is 5 times that in the red. And for Monero, the buy zone has played out rather well with like an N of 3 or 4. When we get below that 365, it's been a decent buy zone, currently around 160. So as we start dipping below 160, it's telling you to dollar cost average in. It didn't actually exceed the multiplier this time. It got to the midline, but it couldn't quite reach the 5x multiple. Basically, it hit the 2.5x multiple, around 470, 500. So in the future, it may be more advantageous to play this as a DCA in the green and then consider exiting between the midline and the 5x multiple up here. If you look at the pitchfork, it performed rather well. Told you that we were bullish once we crossed this midline. Told you we got overheated once we crossed above the pitchfork. How this works is you get 3 points for a rate of change expectation. Gives you a timeline component. And it says we could find support down here at 150. But below that, just like the MA multiplier metric or just the 365 MA, we get into buy zone territory down here. And I have to use the 365 over the 2 year because there just isn't enough data for Monero. You know, there isn't 10 years of data like BTC. The 50 and the 200, Monero is about to cross bearish like most everything in crypto, especially alts. And the trend is not on your side. If you're bullish, looks like we're headed lower. This is a potential mess of a head and shoulders. A lot of people are going to be looking at that as well. And none of that is bullish. So death cross below the 200. Head and shoulders, I like 120, I like 84, right? I like just any lower volume support, any previous horizontal support on the way down. Even this yearly pivot at 120, all that looks fine. As far as dip potential, daily cloud also below. So not on your side there. Potential TKC clamp oversold stuff, but when the entire ecosystem looks dumpy, I don't think Monero is going to be spared there. And just looking at the VPVR, just zoomed in since the beginning of the year, everything in their mother is going to retrace to the yearly open. It's just inevitable at this point. And for Monero, that's around 155. So anything below that, again, just confluence on all these indicators telling me I like sub 160 as a buy zone. Here's XMR BTC on the weekly, below the cloud, death crossed since mid 2019. So no bullishness here whatsoever. Probably just ranges forever at this point, thanks in part to Monero's inflation and also thanks to Monero just not being listed anywhere. It's very hard to trade this if you're in Asia, even if you're in the United States. Kraken still surprisingly has it listed. Maybe it's a honeypot for law enforcement. I don't know, but that's one of the only places you can actually trade it in the United States if you're a US citizen. So I'm not too bullish on the pair, just because I love dumping on Zcash any chance I get. Monero continues to gain price-wise on Zcash slowly over time. This is really a bogus metric, but you want to look at market caps more than anything, which is also a bogus metric. But Zcash, optional privacy just doesn't work. Again, it's mostly turned off on the exchange side of things. And the Zeke BTC chart looks much worse than Monero, certainly since 2017. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme.finance, non-custodial portfolio management tool. You can see performance, AUM, allocations. You can see I'm in Aave USDC right now, collecting interest there. You can see all the trades I make. You can send ETH through USDC or just watch what I'm doing. So that's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.